The story opens in 1940 at the height of World War II, with Britain on the brink of economic collapse. The Blitz has devastated London, industrial centers are strained, and the empire is bleeding resources on multiple fronts. The government faces a dire dilemma: continue financing the war through shrinking reserves and foreign loans, or risk surrendering to Nazi Germany. The public sees rationing, bombings, and hardship, but very few understand the intricate web of secret financial arrangements being forged behind closed doors. At the heart of the narrative is the emergence of a clandestine agreement between the United States and Britain. While the U.S. remains officially neutral, American officials understand that a Nazi victory in Europe would threaten global stability and, importantly, American economic interests. High-level meetings between the British Treasury and U.S. State and Treasury departments are convened in secrecy. These meetings are not just about lending money. They involve drafting a hidden ledger, a financial blueprint that would supply Britain with billions in aid, credit, and war materials. This hidden ledger would later be revealed as a secret bill that Britain would struggle to repay for decades. The British leadership, including the Chancellor of the Exchequer and Prime Minister Winston Churchill, wrestle with the moral and political implications of such dependence. Accepting U.S. support is not simply a financial decision. It is a strategic gamble. Britain is mortgaging its future for survival today. The narrative explores their private discussions, highlighting the tension between immediate wartime needs and long-term economic sovereignty. Some ministers warn that this hidden debt could eventually compromise the empire, while others insist that without American support, Britain will fall, and with it, the global fight against fascism. On the American side, the story introduces shrewd Treasury officials and policymakers who recognize the opportunity. They craft agreements with hidden clauses, repayments in dollars, interest rates that are subtly onerous, and leverage that could influence British policy long after the war ends. These U.S. strategists see the hidden ledger not only as a tool to win the war indirectly, but as a mechanism to establish future economic dominance. Every shipment of weapons, every ton of supplies, comes with strings attached, most of which are invisible to the British public and even many government officials. The chapter closes with a sense of foreboding. Secret ledgers are signed, coded memos exchanged, and wartime logistics intertwined with financial maneuvering. Britain is saved from immediate collapse, but the seeds of post-war financial dependence are sown. The hidden ledger becomes a symbol of both salvation and silent subjugation, a debt that Britain will carry far beyond the war, affecting not only its treasury but also its global influence. By the end of Part 1, readers understand that the true story of World War II is not just fought on battlefields, but also in secret offices, with invisible contracts that could change the fate of an empire. The stage is set for the drama of financial intrigue, moral conflict, and the quiet erosion of imperial power that will unfold in the chapters to come. With the secret ledger in place, Britain's leaders breathe a temporary sigh of relief. The lifeline from the United States disguised as emergency loans, credit lines, and shipments under the Lend-Lease program offers the promise of survival. Yet beneath this relief lies a hidden web of obligations, clauses, and subtle pressures that will soon shape not only the war but the future of the British Empire. Part 2 delves into the terms of these arrangements and the consequences of relying on financial support that comes with invisible strings attached. The narrative begins with British officials poring over the details of the secret agreements. On paper, the loans and credits appear generous, framed as acts of wartime solidarity. However, the fine print reveals interest rates, repayment schedules, and conditions that Britain's leaders can barely afford. Certain agreements stipulate that all loans are to be repaid in U.S. dollars, a currency that Britain cannot easily generate during wartime. Others require that specific goods, particularly military supplies, be sourced from American companies, ensuring that Britain's dependency on the U.S. will deepen with every shipment. Meanwhile, American officials, portrayed as calculating and strategic, treat these arrangements as more than mere acts of generosity. They understand that financial leverage is a subtle but powerful form of control. By offering aid, the U.S. positions itself as the ultimate arbiter of Britain's survival. Any deviation from American terms could risk withdrawal of support at a critical moment. This dynamic transforms the loans from simple assistance into a silent negotiation of power. As Britain struggles to manage these obligations, the story highlights internal debates among political leaders. Some ministers argue that accepting these loans is a necessary evil. Britain's survival, and by extension, the survival of democratic ideals, depends on immediate funding. Others caution that the empire is mortgaging its long-term economic freedom. The tension between wartime urgency and post-war sovereignty creates a persistent undercurrent of anxiety. Each decision to accept another shipment, another loan, or another credit facility reinforces Britain's growing dependence, even as the public remains largely unaware of the financial web enveloping the nation. The chapter also explores the human impact of these financial strings. Factories prioritize American contracts, diverting resources from domestic needs. Food and material shortages persist despite the influx of aid. Citizens see the effects of war, but not the hidden cause. Britain is surviving, but at a cost dictated by another nation's economic strategy. The story captures the moral ambiguity of the moment. Britain is grateful, yet constrained, a reluctant debtor to a power that remains ostensibly an ally. By the end of Part 2, readers witness the subtle transformation of the British Empire. The loans and credits that initially seem life-saving are revealed as double-edged swords, providing immediate survival while silently reshaping the empire's post-war destiny. Every shipment of arms, every dollar lent, carries invisible strings. The narrative foreshadows the post-war reckoning, hinting that the seeds of Britain's financial vulnerability are being sown even as bombs fall on London and soldiers fight overseas. Part 2 leaves the audience with a growing awareness. Survival during wartime is not free. In the hidden corridors of finance, Britain is signing a contract with the future, one that will test its economic resilience and global influence for decades to come. By the time Britain reaches the midpoint of the war, the hidden ledger and secret loans have become more than just abstract numbers. They are actively shaping military decisions on the ground. Part 3 of the story delves into the intricate interplay between financial obligations and wartime strategy, revealing how economic dependence begins to influence the very course of battles and campaigns. This chapter emphasizes that wars are not only fought with soldiers and weapons, but also with ledgers, balance sheets, and invisible strings of debt. As Britain coordinates its war effort, military leaders find themselves constrained by the terms of the American loans. Supplies, munitions, and equipment often come with conditions. Factories must prioritize U.S.-sourced materials, certain operations require approval, and expenditures are closely monitored by American financial liaisons embedded within British ministries. Every strategic decision, from launching offensives to rationing resources, must consider the hidden financial costs. The narrative explores tense moments where generals debate whether to commit forces to critical battles, knowing that an overextension could jeopardize Britain's ability to meet financial obligations. The story introduces the warfront accountants, a small cadre of bureaucrats who track every pound spent and every dollar owed. These individuals operate behind the scenes, scrutinizing shipments, contracts, and repayments, ensuring that Britain does not violate the terms of its loans. Their work is meticulous but invisible, and their influence rivals that of military commanders in some cases. Through their eyes, readers see how economic pressures begin to dictate military priorities, revealing the hidden costs of dependence on foreign financing. Simultaneously, tension simmers among British leadership. Some officials begin to question whether strategic decisions are being subtly influenced or even dictated by American financial power. While the U.S. provides critical support, the empire's sovereignty appears increasingly constrained. Churchill and his inner circle wrestle with moral and practical dilemmas. Should they risk national resources to achieve military objectives, even if it endangers repayment schedules? Or should they prioritize financial survival at the expense of tactical advantage? This dynamic creates a rich layer of political intrigue, showing that the empire is fighting two wars simultaneously, one on the battlefield and one in the realm of finance. The chapter also highlights the broader consequences for Britain's economy and society. Industries pivot toward war production dictated by loan terms, diverting labor and materials from civilian needs. Citizens continue to experience rationing and shortages, unaware that financial constraints, not merely the war itself, are shaping daily life. This creates a subtle tension between public perception and the hidden reality. The empire appears resilient, yet its autonomy is quietly eroding under the weight of invisible debts. By the end of Part 3, readers understand that Britain's war strategy is inseparable from its financial obligations. Military victories are achieved, but at the cost of growing dependence on U.S. loans and credit. The hidden ledger is no longer a distant abstraction. It is a decisive factor in battles, planning, and policy. This realization foreshadows the post-war reckoning, the seeds of Britain as economic vulnerability, and eventual decline of its empire are being sown amidst the very strategies designed to save it. Part 3 underscores a critical theme of the story, that financial power, though invisible, can shape the fate of nations as decisively as any army, and that the empire's survival during the war comes with strings that will bind it long after the guns fall silent. By the later years of World War II, Britain has managed to survive against seemingly insurmountable odds. The Blitz has ended, and the tide of battles across Europe is slowly turning in favor of the Allies. Yet behind this apparent success lies a subtle but profound shift. The empire's reliance on American financial aid has created a hidden system of influence that reaches into every corner of Britain's government, economy, and global strategy. Part 4, The Invisible Hand, explores how U.S. economic leverage begins to quietly shape Britain's decisions, colonies, and post-war future. The chapter opens with British officials realizing that loans and lend-lease agreements have consequences beyond immediate financial repayment. Industries that once supplied the domestic market are now forced to prioritize American contracts. Factories producing steel, munitions, and ships operate under terms dictated by U.S. authorities or financial liaisons embedded in Britain's treasury. The invisible hand of economic dependence is not a blunt instrument, it is precise and deliberate, guiding Britain's production, resource allocation, and even military priorities. The story introduces several pivotal moments illustrating the subtle but pervasive influence of the United States. British ministers, negotiating wartime strategies and post-war plans, find themselves constrained by obligations tied to secret financial arrangements. Requests to divert resources to certain colonial operations or domestic reconstruction projects are delayed or denied if they conflict with American interests. Every decision, from shipping supplies to maintaining troop deployments, carries a silent financial calculus. Each pound spent or contract signed deepens Britain's reliance on its creditor. Beyond the mainland, the empire itself begins to feel pressure. British colonies, particularly in India, Africa, and the Middle East, are drawn into the economic web. Britain must extract resources, maintain supply lines, and enforce colonial governance while simultaneously adhering to financial stipulations dictated by U.S. support. The narrative shows colonial administrators struggling to balance imperial control with economic realities. As Britain funnels materials to satisfy American contracts, colonial needs are sidelined, planting seeds of discontent and accelerating the drive for independence. The invisible hand also operates politically. U.S. officials, though not overtly dictatorial, influence British policy through access to money, credit, and critical wartime supplies. Decisions on post-war reconstruction, trade, and global diplomacy are increasingly shaped by what Britain can afford under its hidden debts. Even as Britain emerges victorious on the battlefield, its sovereignty in financial and strategic matters is subtly but steadily compromised. Part 4 emphasizes the paradox at the heart of Britain's wartime success. While American aid allows Britain to survive and eventually triumph militarily, the very mechanisms that ensure survival simultaneously bind the empire in unseen chains. Britain's leaders understand the moral and practical dilemma. Rejecting U.S. influence is impossible in the short term, yet acquiescence carries long-term consequences for sovereignty, empire, and global influence. By the end of the chapter, readers see that the true cost of the war extends far beyond human lives and physical destruction. The invisible hand of financial dependence has reshaped Britain's empire, its economy, and its post-war trajectory. Military victories have been achieved, but at the subtle price of autonomy. Part 4 sets the stage for the inevitable reckoning to come. The war may end, but the empire's economic and political fate is already being quietly dictated by an unseen power. With the guns silenced and victory declared in 1945, Britain emerges from World War II as one of the world's triumphant powers. Yet beneath the celebrations lies a sobering reality. The empire's financial foundations are crumbling under the weight of decades-old secret debts owed to the United States. Part 5, Post-War Reckoning, explores how the hidden wartime financial agreements transform from mere obligations into an existential crisis, exposing the fragility of Britain's economic and imperial power. The chapter begins by revealing the scale of Britain's indebtedness. The Lend-Lease program, along with secret loans negotiated under the hidden ledger, has created an enormous post-war liability. While these funds allowed Britain to survive the immediate pressures of war, they were not gifts, they are loans that demand repayment in dollars, with interest, and often with conditions attached. British officials now confront the harsh truth. Their empire has survived militarily, but at a financial cost that may permanently weaken its sovereignty and influence. Economically, the empire is strained to the breaking point. Industries are exhausted from years of wartime production, infrastructure is in disrepair, and the costs of repaying American creditors siphon off funds desperately needed for reconstruction. Social programs, housing, and industrial recovery are delayed or underfunded because money must flow overseas to satisfy repayment schedules. Citizens who endured years of rationing and sacrifice are stunned to discover that their nation's post-war hardships are not merely the consequence of war damage, but also of secret financial obligations. Politically, the empire begins to unravel. Colonies that once relied on Britain for economic and military support sense the empire's weakened state. Calls for independence grow louder, particularly in India, Africa, and parts of the Middle East. As Britain struggles to fund colonial administration while servicing its U.S. debt, the hidden financial strings laid down during the war translate into diminished global influence. Britain can no longer project power or maintain trade dominance as it once did. Meanwhile, the United States leverages its position as creditor to shape international policy and trade, solidifying its role as the new superpower. The narrative also examines the human toll of this reckoning. British leaders face public scrutiny and political infighting. The once revered Treasury officials who negotiated wartime loans are criticized for mortgaging the nation's future. Citizens struggle with austerity. knowing that much of the national wealth is flowing not toward recovery but into servicing debt. The story emphasizes that the consequences of financial dependence are as profound as any military defeat. Britain has won the war, yet in many ways, it has lost its economic independence. By the end of Part 5, readers understand the full impact of the hidden ledger and secret loans. Britain's post-war struggles are no longer a matter of rationing or damaged infrastructure alone. They are the result of strategic financial manipulation during wartime. The empire's decline is accelerating, and the U.S. emerges as the dominant global power, using its economic leverage to shape the post-war world order. The chapter sets the stage for the final reflections in Part 6, showing that the legacy of war is measured not only in victory, but in the debts and dependencies that silently dictate the future. As the world steps into the post-war era, the echoes of World War II are still felt in every corner of Britain. Yet beyond the visible scars of bombed cities and returning soldiers, a more subtle but far-reaching consequence emerges: the hidden financial obligations Britain accrued during the war. Part 6, The Legacy of the Secret Bill, examines how the secret ledger and wartime loans shaped the British Empire's decline, cemented the United States' global dominance, and redefined the balance of power for decades to come. The chapter opens with a vivid depiction of Britain struggling to rebuild. Cities are in ruins, industries are overextended, and social services are overwhelmed. But beneath this visible devastation lies the invisible burden of the secret debt. Every pound earned is partially allocated to servicing loans, interest payments, and contract obligations to the United States. The story highlights the frustration of British economists and politicians, who recognize that the empire's sovereignty is compromised not by military defeat, but by financial entanglement. The hidden bill has transformed Britain's victory into a prolonged period of economic dependency. Globally, the repercussions are profound. The British Empire, once a network of colonies and global influence stretching across continents, begins to unravel. Nations like India, Ghana, and Egypt push harder for independence, emboldened by Britain's weakened fiscal position. Colonial administrators find themselves constrained, unable to fund development projects or maintain military presence without U.S.-dependent resources. The narrative emphasizes that the empire's decline is accelerated by financial leverage rather than direct conquest or rebellion, an invisible hand directing the course of history. Meanwhile, the United States consolidates its position as the new economic superpower. By leveraging wartime loans, America shapes international institutions, trade agreements, and post-war reconstruction efforts, effectively rewriting the rules of global economics. Britain, despite its historical prominence, becomes a secondary player in international finance. The story portrays U.S. officials subtly guiding policy in ways that favor long-term American influence, turning wartime generosity into strategic control. Part 6 also explores the human dimension of the legacy. British citizens live with austerity, knowing that much of the nation's wealth is flowing to pay debts rather than rebuild infrastructure or improve living conditions. Politicians and historians alike debate the moral implications. Was survival during the war worth a post-war era defined by dependency? The story portrays the hidden ledger as a silent architect of Britain's diminished global status, a reminder that financial power can be as decisive as military might. The chapter closes with a reflective tone, emphasizing the long-term lessons of the hidden bill. Britain's experience demonstrates that wars are not only fought with guns and tanks, but also with credit, contracts, and economic influence. The secret financial agreements crafted in the shadows of World War II did more than ensure immediate survival, they reshaped global power dynamics, marking the rise of the United States and the decline of Britain's imperial authority. Victory on the battlefield came at the cost of economic subjugation, and the empire would never be the same. Part 6 leaves readers with a sobering realization. History is often dictated not just by battles won or lost, but by the invisible strings of money and influence that bind nations long after the war ends. The secret bill for World War II becomes a symbol of both survival and subtle control, highlighting the enduring power of finance in shaping the destiny of empires.